Okay. Very good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back after lunch. I hope you've enjoyed this morning's session. I certainly have. Some very interesting discussions, and some very interesting discussions as well at lunchtime. Before we move on and go into this afternoon's session, can I just make a request, please? I don't know if we have any ship owners in the room at all. But if you do, or you have access to a ship owner, can I ask you, please, this is a very personal request. I'm getting approached by a lot of junior officers. We've talked a lot this morning about cadets, but we're also approached by junior officers, third officers and fourth engineers in particular, who have got their certificates of competency, but they can't get that first job because they don't have the experience. All the adverts you see, experience required, but nobody will give them that first chance. So please, if you have a company, you employ third officers or fourth engineers, will you be that company that gives them a chance? Just give them that job, and then they'll be experienced. Thank you. It's with great pleasure we move on to session 3, monitoring and control. And our first speaker this afternoon, Captain Ken Fernandez. Ken started off as a Denhold deck cadet on tankers, mostly tankers, in 1989 after a pre-sea course, and then moved on to Chevron in the mid-90s, followed by several other companies. He has been a deep sea master on over 10 vessels, mostly chemical and product, and then moved into ship management for 7 years in Singapore and Dubai, and in various positions, including marine manager of chemical tankers, vetting, and port captain. He has extensive new build and dry dock experience. Captain Ken worked as an independent, starting his own crewing agency for a couple of years, and later moved to flag inspection for the Marshall Islands. In 2015, he moved to Spain and joined the Spanish petroleum company Cepsa. Full-time, where he is Cat 1, Sire Inspector. He's worked in vetting at Cepsa for 7 years, performing vessel screening, ship inspections, and marine technical advice. He's also the co-lead as the Nautical Expert Group at OCIMF for the last year. Captain Ken has an MBA from Carbondale in the USA, and like me, he has an HND from Warsash in the UK. Captain Ken. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Boa tarde. John, thanks a lot for the introduction, and a big congratulations to the Nautical Institute, and thanks to Joa and Mark for all the efforts that you've put in. Sorry I was not able to help out being a member, but you know it's busy for us there in Spain. Am I too loud, or can I move back? Okay, because I see myself going too much into the mic. Okay, I work for Cepsa in Madrid. It is an oil company, traditionally an oil company and now an energy company. I'm part of the vetting team, and why it's necessary to introduce that is because the next, this presentation is dealing with vetting, and one of the tools we are going to launch, it's called Occam's Sire 2.0. Now, Sire 2.0 is like a new baby. It's difficult to release it. Some of the women here know, they agree. And as parents, you all know it's so hard to, nurture something. So Sire 2.0 is going to be launched into the industry next year on a full scale. And of course, we need to nurture it. Before that, I'm just going to tell you, I met some interesting people here, and I'm very privileged to be invited to this panel of speakers. because I mean, there were fantastic speakers here, and I'm simply humble. Also, it left me a little bit confused because there is a huge demand for seafarers, and there are no berths for young seafarers. So that's a very old chicken and egg story, and it's got us all confused how to solve that. People want experience. Owners want to employ experienced people, but they don't want to give anyone a chance. The other thing that got me confused, well, I say confused in a good way, is that there is no energy solution, it seems to be. We are trying to do decarbonization, and you're looking at the the past presentations. It appears to be no clear pathway, and also since I'm quite involved with OCIM, I'm also involved with my own work at CEPSA regarding CII and all these things. So we get pretty deep into legislation, into regulation, and we understand that, finally they had to put something out there, and it's there. But is it a real solution? It's not part of my presentation, but there was so much learning from the rest of the speakers, so I'm compelled to speak about it. And the solution is that we need to slow down the way we live. We need to slow down our consumption. Because what is going to happen with CII is that it kicks in next year. It is initiated next year, but it kicks in really 3 years later, when you are forced that, if you exceed a C rating, you're going to be penalized. The only way out of this is you slow down. There's another line of thought, and some ship owners are onto it, is nuclear vessels. That concept came about because of the Russian icebreakers. They're using these small nuclear, and there's been a lot of progress. But nuclear is a taboo topic, so it's not something that we're going to touch anywhere soon. So that's my learning process, and now I have a challenge to keep you guys awake after lunch. So, yeah. Okay. There are 3 things in common. I mean, the Nautical Institute, myself, and OCIM, we have something very much in common. We are more or less the same age. Well, 2 things. One is it means I'm quite old, and it means that the Nautical Institute is very experienced at what they do. So, John, kudos to you. And also the president and CEO. Okay, how do you operate this? In the last slide, that was our building in Madrid. There are 4 towers, 4 torres. We occupy the first tower. I'm part of the trading team in vetting. The vetting is part of the trading team. That means essentially we get to witness live trading of cargoes. This is our global footprint, but I will speak to you a little bit about vetting because that's where my presentation is. So what we have here is CEPSA is traditionally an oil company, just like all other oil majors, and they're making a transition into newer energies. Everybody seems to know what is happening, but at the same time, nobody really knows what is happening. So that's the puzzle we are in. So we are right now into different energies: solar, wind, hydrogen. But traditionally, our assets are in equity oil and refining. In the south of Spain, in Algeciras and Huelva, we have 2 major refineries, and we have chemical plants in Canada, in Shanghai. In Indonesia, we started a new biofuel plant, considering that there's going to be a big demand for biofuels, as you know. And we have a little bit of E&P activity. E&P is exploration and production, where you get your equity oil. Equity oil is oil that you own yourself from the fields. CEPSA is a net importer of oil, crude oil. So what we have is not enough for our refining, our consumption. Meaning to say, as we consume more, we sell more. In the trading, we trade products, but the vetting department is the vetting for the full CEPSA business, all the business units. So in vetting, in oil major vetting, the way it works is any movement of cargo from point A to point B has to get a thumbs up from the vetting team. So why is that? Because every movement, as you've seen in the previous slides, some of our panelists discussed STS and incidents, and there was PNI here talking about the importance of crew, which I will also discuss, human factors. So to be able to evaluate these risks, shipping by its nature has a lot of risks. And because of that, every consignment has to be screened. Just to tell you, today the price of crude oil is like $90, right? It went up to 100, now back to 90. Your Suezmax carries about 1 million barrels. So 1 million multiplied by 90 or 100 is 100 million. We do about 10 consignments. That's $1 billion of risk in a month, not in a. And we are not a big player, okay? We do more than 10 consignments for our own consumption. We trade the same volumes, almost 10 consignments, and that is only crude oil. But then the crude goes into our refineries, comes out as gasoline, comes out as naphtha, comes out as diesel, which you guys consume, comes out as chemicals, which you guys consume, and each of these has added risks. And that's why the oil major has a vetting department, and that's why we have tools such as inspection tool, which is SIRE 2.0, and we have something called TMSA. This is our global footprint. I understand you got a good look at it. I'm going to move to the next slide. Okay, so I've explained to you why we do what we do in vetting, but if we do this individually, it's not very efficient and it's not very productive. So we want to do this together. So a few years ago, and OCIM is also more than 50 years old, so they've been doing this for quite some time. But the SIRE program was started in 1993, and we wanted to have a common database where we could understand ships, understand the risk. We could share information about ships, and we wanted to have a certain minimum standard for the tanker shipping industry. We are not involved in anything outside of tankers. So it's oil tankers, product tankers, chemical tankers, gas carriers, LNG, LPG. Of course, because the other business doesn't involve oil majors, so we're not involved in that. And when you have an inspection regime, you need to, of course, have inspectors. So OCIM has a pool of inspectors which also need to pass certain qualifications, and so they're called accredited inspectors. And we started doing that in the early part of 2000. I'll need my glass. In 2005, we extended this program. OCIM extended this program to Bayer. buyer is a SIRE ship inspection program applicable to barges, because that was the missing link. Because when you transfer cargo, you transfer it from a ship, and sometimes it goes to smaller barges. So then in 2005, we incorporated them. And all this was going pretty fine. And, as you can see up there, there's an 80% reduction in major spills. We have more or less a uniform standard of vessels that we can employ, which is not so easy, considering that you have seafarers from different nationalities, from different training backgrounds, ship owners which are located in flags of convenience. So there's a big variety of shipping out there, and to be able to pick the right one is where OCIM and all the SIRE inspectors and the team in the vetting comes into play. But what we did was okay till now, and more or less we have plateaued. But as you saw from the previous presentation, there is so much new happening. There's digitization happening with Wärtsilä doing digital twins. There's something called MASS, which is unmanned vessel. We are, as OCIM, we represent that thinking at IMO. There's so much technology coming into play. There is a decarbonization happening. And we need to be able to respond to all those changes. Just an example, when we went into your low sulfur fuel oils, and now almost every month we have an incident of plunger barrels getting damaged. Plunger barrels, your main engine, for those of you who are not engineers, your main engine has different units, 6 or 8, and each of them has a fuel pump, and the fuel pump has a plunger barrel. The new fuel that you're using has chemicals, especially if it's of shale origin. So it damages the plunger barrels, and we have a vessel coming into, say, one of our ports in Algeciras, and the engine breaks down. If the engine breaks down, there can be an incident. Not necessarily, but there can be. It's a huge potential. So these new regulations, related to decarbonization, come with their own risk, come with their own cost, come with their own challenges. Also, under CII, this is the first time charterers are directly involved. CEPSA and all the other oil majors, we charter vessels. So we could take one of your assets, use it for 3 years from 2023 to 2026, and really bring down the rating of the vessel and hand it over to you. And you will be in a bad position as a ship owner as to what to do with that. So life now is getting very complex, and so it means we need new tools to help us deal with this complexity. So I've introduced you to SIRE 1.0, let me call it that. We started to call it, we used to call it VIQ7. VIQ7 is a questionnaire, like an audit checklist, but SIRE inspections are not audits and they're not surveys. They're a combination of a lot of things to ensure that oil majors have the necessary standards that we need. As you saw, as I explained to you, the quantum of risk that we are exposed to is quite high. So we use 2 tools there, the VIQ7, which is going to be upgraded into SIRE 2.0, which is an inspection questionnaire, and then we use TMSA. TMSA it's a self-assessment scheme, and it has 13 chapters and 4 stages. So that is something that the owners declare that they do. Of course, the time is very short, so we cannot spend too much time on explaining everything. I think people who in the tanker business already understand these things. But the VIQ7, or what we were doing previously, had no way, because the TMSA, when we were auditing our time charter vessels for TMSA, we don't go and inspect the ships. And TMSA is all about the ships. Well, it's about process, and it's about how operators conduct themselves and what sort of procedures they have, but it's related to ships. And the ships were missed out of that link. So SIRE 2.0 brings that missing link into the picture. And the other element that was missed out was human factors. Well, in the previous years, we did look at human factors, but that depended on the individual inspector's experience. So it depended. I mean, it was done in a very arbitrary way. Now it is more structured. So we are going to start looking at hardware, process, and human factors. Okay, so let me go to the next slide here. It's a little bit inconvenient because I need to come to the mic and I can't see the slides and I can't turn around, because normally when we do it in an oil major, we have another screen here. So pardon me. So what I've done is more or less I discussed this slide with you already. Why is it that we are moving to 2.0? And the difference here is in SIRE 2.0 inspections, we are going to be using a tablet, So all the information we collect, previously it was paper-based inspections. Now it's going to be on a tablet, and never before have we used photographs. So we're going to use photographs. The tablet I will introduce a little later in my slides. Yes, so we're going to use a tablet which has GPS input, and it's also able to track the inspector. So if an inspector, previously you had inspectors going around with a piece of paper and checking, and a SIRE inspection typically lasts for about 8 hours. So you could do an inspection in 4 hours and get off a vessel and probably try to record the wrong time. But this way you can't do it, because everything you do, the tablet records your movements. It has a step counter. Moment you get on the gangway, you activate it. Moment you get off the gangway, you deactivate it. That's the time you spend on inspection. Any breaks, you need to record it. You need to stop the step counter. So it's pretty high tech, and it's got all the controls in place to make the system more transparent, more accountable. And also what SIRE 2.0 differs from SIRE 2.1 is, previously an inspection told you what a ship looks like now. There was no warranty that it will be the same 1 month from now. You understand? But right now, putting in process inputs and human factor inputs, more or less you are assured that as long as that crew which is on board now doesn't sign off, you're going to get a similar outcome on the subsequent voyages. So that's fundamentally quite different. For those in the tanker business will understand and will be able to relate to it. Okay. A lot of us at OCIM were involved in making this something called a CVIQ. It's a compiled vessel inspection questionnaire, and it is made using a bow tie format. I don't know how many of you have used bow ties. You have used bow ties before, anyone? There too. Okay. So, but for the rest, I will briefly explain to you. Now, the thing is, I need to turn to the other side, so it's a little bit difficult. Okay, yeah. So what you have there in pink, usually it's red, but okay, I think I've been a little bit artistic. It's called a top event. Your top event is like a big spill you have or a fire. These, we rank them as top events. It's something you don't want on ships. You know, your vessel burning down, collision, oil spill. You don't want these. These are top events. On the left, at least to my left, you have preventive controls. Okay, the slides are not so great because it's a cut, copy, paste. I did not make it up. I copied it. I mean, you don't make a bow tie. It take me a very long time, and I don't have the time. So on a tanker, for example, if the top event was an oil spill, your preventive measures would be your procedures, your SMS, ship management systems, your tanks, your level gauging system, your high level systems, all the controls you have, your pressure gauges, you understand? And on the right, for me, you have mitigation measures. Mitigation measures is, despite everything being in place, if you still have the top event, then how do you deal with that contingency? How do you deal with an oil spill? So basically, that's your SOPEP gear, your SOPEP equipment, your contracts you have with EMSA, all sorts of spill clearing. And to the further left is your hazards. Your hazards are your transfer operations. In this case, because it's a spill, in a collision, it could be something else. And all those threats there, each transfer operation has different threats. So it could be that your high-level alarms have failed, your fixed-level gauging has failed, your crew is not competent, and all sorts of things. You're not going to believe this, but we put hundreds and hundreds of questions into this system, into a bow tie, and came out with pretty good results, and that's how we designed the CVIQ. The CVIQ has 4 types of questions, if I recall correctly. They're core. The core questions are, if you get it wrong, it relates directly to the top event. So those questions will be asked every time. Okay, I think I have to rush this. So basically, you need to have the CVIQ has 4 question types. Core, rotational, conditional, and campaign type. So rotational are those which rotate from one inspection, maybe on the 4th inspection. But it's really, to be honest, it's very difficult to do the SIO 2.0 in 15 minutes. But okay, I'm going to try. It gets very fast actually from here on, because there's not much talking from my side. It is just to give you a glimpse, especially ship owners and the wider industry, what you need to do to make this happen. So these are some of the documents that the owners need to prepare. And in the first slide, I gave you a link. So owners will need to go and submit these documents to SIRE in the OCHIM website before an inspection happens. One of the new documents is PIQ, which is a pre-inspection questionnaire, and we will explain it in the next slide. I'm sorry, but in the benefit of time, I have to rush this. I would like to explain it. But it is what it is. So on the left, those documents which I showed to you, on the left is, if you were the owner or an operator and you go to initiate a SIRE inspection, these are the documents you will have to load on the left side of the screen. Class status, crew matrix, PIQ. PIQ is on the right, and it teaches you how to, what all data is required for the PIQ. This is a new concept. Previously, we had something called an HVPQ, which was a pretty static document. But now, to increase the dynamism, we have another document called PIQ. Yes, as I said, it's very rapid from here on. So this is the photo template, and owners need to upload over 30-something photos. And the inspector will look at the photos and describe it. He will look at the photo which is uploaded and look at the ship and say if the ship matches that photo. If that part of the ship which is in the photo doesn't match, then he'll put a comment. Okay. This is basically the observation process, but I think none of you are going to be site inspectors or ship owners, so probably we can skip it just to move on much faster. But just to be very brief, so you have hardware, process, and human, and each of those there is a SOC. Subject of concern, and there is something called NOC, which is nature of concern. A subject of concern is you identify the topic that you're talking about. It could be a person, it could be a process, it could be a deck, and the nature of concern is you voice what concern you have. So what OCHIM has done is given you in the computer a cause analysis tree, which you can select the subject of concern and the nature of concern. And that way, but you still need to write the deficiency physically. So in addition to this, you will write a deficiency. So you do that for hardware. Process is the same, and human is the same but slightly different. The key here is we do not identify the actual officer because, we have a no-blame culture. So we identify the officer as like a senior deck officer or something like that. And then you have the nature of concern here is performance influencing factors, PIFs. So this is the new human factors element we look at. Never before has the industry looked at it. So when we find the deficiency related to a crew member, we have to assign one of the PIFs. Was he nervous? Was the work environment not conducive? Is it human-centric? Are the moorings human-centric? Are you getting splashing waves coming on the guy going to drop anchor? What happens is, here we don't give a solution. That's fortunately for me, I don't have to give a solution. We just make deficiencies, give it to the owners, and they will come up with a solution which will then close the loop that everybody was discussing about humans. I think the P&I were discussing that human factors is very essential, and humans, are the reason for so many incidents. So this thing that we bring to the table will close that gap. Photography is what we already discussed. You don't need to know this. This is just a list of all those codes which you don't need to remember. They are in a database, and the annexes tell you where they are. So we just go through this. Inspection, opening, closing meetings. There's a lot there. But I don't think we have enough time. There is one item where we have something called a defect list, which we need to, which a vessel needs to prepare and declare to the inspector, which is pretty new. This is your tablet, how it's going to look. It's intrinsically safe. It's an Android system. This is the implementation schedule. So we are going to start in OCHIM in November 2022. It's for 1 month internally. In 15 December, it's going to be launched to a few players and to the wider tanker industry in Feb 2023. And then in June 2023 is SIRE 2.0 comes as the dominant inspection regime. Whilst in this whole test period, Sire 1, using the VIQ7, is going to be the commercial template that's going to be used for all commercial operation. Thank you very much. Thank you. And it was a big rush. Thank you. The other thing is I need to leave. So, one, thank you very much. I got a flight to catch. Thank you.
Yes, I'll just introduce you. Thank you very much, Captain Ken, and safe flight home. We appreciate that. Okay. It gives me great pleasure now to introduce a fellow pilot, Captain Carlos Serpa Carvalho. Since 1998, Captain Carlos has been a pilot at the Port of Lisbon. He is now a senior pilot and coordinator of the pilotage service for Lisbon Harbour. Prior to this, he had a seagoing career from 1990 to 1998, reaching the rank of master. He holds a master's degree in port management, port graduate in maritime and port law, and a postgraduate in marine transportation and port management. Over to you. Thank you, Captain Carlos.
So, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank Nautical Institute on behalf of Apibar, the invitation, and also to congratulate them. I had the honor to write an article some years ago to Richard Marinha about the Trinity House, 500 years. I hope you get there. Thank you. I'll keep it as simple as possible. So, and try not to look up too much. I am the Vice President of Apibar, and they asked us to define some challenges now and on the near future. First of all, I am lucky because most of the audience will know what is a pilot, I guess. For those who don't, a pilot is somebody that helps a ship to go alongside safely. That means working for the vessel, for the ship owner, for the shippers, for the coastal state, for the port authority, for everyone, to avoid pollution, to avoid loss of life, to avoid loss of property. If we start reading this sentence, is one definition from backwards. So first we have the definition, and then up, one of the most visible aspects is the difficulty to transfer from the pilot boat to the ship. And that will go for my first challenge. This is the PTA, pilot transfer arrangement. Like in other aspects, we are on 2022, and we still have loss of life every year during this process. First of all, we have IMPA survey, the International Maritime Pilot Association, is doing a survey every year, and with very high numbers of non-compliant pilot letters and pilot arrangements. And even though it's underestimated, I'm going to tell you why. First of all, lack of training from the crew. Let's say they have the hardware, the pilot ladder is in good condition, but not properly rigged. They have a poster, and now you're talking, further on I'll talk about the recommendations. Here it's mandatory. There's mandatory from IMO, Regulation 23, and from SOLAS, also IMO, Regulation 23, and IMO 1045, how to rig the pilot ladder. They have the poster, sometimes they have the poster by the pilot ladder position, and not following this. Second question, even more difficult to understand, new buildings. We have very good designs. We have, when you see IX, it's classification societies, of course, cooperating with fair state, and we have new cruise vessels with a huge railing rake without the ability for the pilot boat to go alongside, or the pilot ladder to be alongside ship side. Not safe, it's a new building. You don't understand why, but another problem to be addressed. Furthermore, during the continuous surveys from flag state, port state, IX here as recognized organizations, many of the times they go on board, they don't check pilot ladder because it's stowed, because the combination is not assembled, they have the gangway in and out, not checking the pilot ladder. Maybe they should check more. And when I told it was understated the number of non-compliant, we have two reasons. One reason at least. Pilots, we have this survey every year. Pilots are not filling all the reports they should. That's the first reason it's understated. Second reason for non-compliant operation from the pilots, sometimes they use non-compliant ways. Okay, I see it's okay, but I can manage to go on board. It's a stupid thing. Now I get mad with captain and tell him next time, no, next port will be like the same, next time will be the same. So there's some to blame on the pilots themselves. Next challenge, increasing size of the vessels. We played it this morning. It's we have here all container vessels. The same goes for cruise vessels. For bulk carriers and tankers, it was the same for many years. So they are increasing. It's a big challenge. As you can see from the photograph, it's a huge challenge, more 400 meters. So what are the consequences of this? First of all, can port infrastructures adapt to the size of the vessels? Not very fast. I'm talking about navigation channels and turning basins. It's difficult to adapt the turning basin from one day to another. New cranes you can buy, new navigation channels or bases, it's more difficult. Like engineer George Antunes told in the morning, we have eco speed now. We have less and less powerful engines. We are worried about consumption, eco speed traveling. It's going to have some consequences also. So if you have bigger vessels, we have deeper draft and bigger windage areas. That means they are most affected by the current and by the wind. If you combine this with low power, then we have a vessel very difficult to stop and to maneuver. So you must have access to more powerful tugs and more maneuverable tugs, because to turn in tight space is not only about power, it's also maneuverable tugs. We have one other factor to help us. It's the PPU, Pilot Portable Unit, that can read the head and stern movement, the head, the swinging, rate of turn, at the same time, but all together in a tablet. So it was impossible to check if you've been to sea, if you look at the angle from the bridge to the bow, you won't see the base until 300 meters away. Impossible to check this from the vessel to the base. Another challenge, a big one, over-reliance on technology. To make it simple, imagine a young medical doctor, fresh from medical school, arriving at the intensive care unit, and is looking at the heart rate monitor. You see that goes up and down, bleeping. When you see a straight line horizontal, that means that the patient is dead. Doesn't matter if the patient is smiling and waving back, he's dead, okay? No, that happens. On board, happens the same. We call this the PlayStation effect. Or on board, you must look out of the window to make sure where you are. That's important. This is happening especially to lack of training of the crews. I'm older. I'm sorry to say this, but that's true. But I had the awareness to all try, and I had the help from SARA, many veterans, to have different methods of obtaining position fixing. So it's not enough to see GPS. The GPS must add radar distance ashore to make sure that you are really on this place. That's the point with the... We have the new phenomenon, almost new, jamming, and just introducing the passing by. Is when we have interference, let's say you are increasing the noise over a given frequency. This could be accidental or intentional. That can block that frequency or then can disturb the transmission and cause you problems. And spoofing, when you receive a mail from your bank, that is not from your bank. The same happens at sea. And that this jamming, intentional, and spoofing are two of the main cases of cyber attacks. So we have wrong information to and from the vessel, wrong position of heads to navigation. You could misplace intentional one buoy or another head to navigation. And you can expect, and everybody is expecting, the increase of this type of attacks in number and intensity, so becoming more and more serious. I used to say, don't trust my words. If you want more information on this, check the other site for this, the very good information. I just have two cases to show. This is from last week. I was outbound on the cruise vessel, this one here. Inbound, there was another vessel, a smaller one here. This is a small dot, a green dot from radar image. Everything okay? So we have the radar image. We have this is a radar with a layer of nautical chart, electronic underneath, some AIS information. AIS information, this vessel was inbound doing, let's say, 10 knots, 090. AIS information was doing the same, but on a different place, ashore. This was last week. So this can happen anytime. You can imagine this with more vessels, with fog. I don't know what was the damage, I don't care, but this can happen. So my advice always to cruise, don't get blind, don't get hypnotized with electronics. Look outside, that's the only recommended. This happened to me last week, some time ago. This is the entrance of Port of Lisbon. We call it the South Fairway, the main channel. I was taking in, this is a photograph outbound, but I was taking in a container vessel, 12-meter draft. They have an Indian crew, good standard of operation, and the second officer starts shouting, shallow waters ahead. The channel is dredged to 16 meters, so it was impossible. And I was coming to check, there is a sounding of 9.8. This is wrong. It was wrong. Outbound, I passed over. I don't know how they get information. I can say it was for people that sail, that been to sea, using chart corrections and tracings. Every week we had a big bag of many hours to do. This is a good improvement, but watch for the safety of electronic charts. Now we have another challenge that we're going to face. The most famous maritime autonomous surface ships, the MASS. It was a design from 2017, ordered, should be sailing now to 2022, fully autonomous. No, they have the pilot on board. I'm sorry, the pilot boat is there. They have a bridge and accommodation. The challenges are how this vessel is going to communicate in fully autonomous mode, or is going to communicate with the rest of navigation. Liability, who is the master? Some guy at shore playing with the PlayStation, some computer is the master, I don't know. They must know, the P&I should know about this stuff. Cybersecurity, again, I'm not an expert. I was attending a meeting some time ago. People from Rolls-Royce, very, very, very fantastic experts. And the last speaker was, I can assure, telling this, I can assure this is 100% safe. It's somebody with 60 years old tells you it's safe, don't trust him. Hackers are 16 years old, not 60, 15, 14. So don't trust it, cybersecurity. This is the initial project design of the Arab Birkeland. No bridge, no accommodation. They still have the bridge and people on board and pilot on board. Another item that worries the most, because I'm selling small boats, it's regarding detection of small targets by computer. This is a vessel sailing from one terminal in Lisbon, and there's a small fishing boat, as usual, there. It's there. I don't know if you can see it on the image. It's a small dot, but I don't know what the autonomous vessel will do regarding this type of small fishing boats, small sailing boats, but we'll see. This problem, another challenge that we're going to face, it was addressed in the morning very good by Captain Padron. I don't know if he's still in the room. My good friend Pablo Pamplona from Maritime Administration said, oh, it's fantastic, we are now going up to the first place of Europe, but the cadets cannot board the vessels. I'm not coming back to this, it's a big problem. The amount of cadets able to board are very, very few. My concern is now, because it was discussed already, regarding the pilots. Like other professions, in my advice, pilots should have a time at sea. This is very important because most of the job on board is both maneuvering and communicating authorities, but the relationship with the captain, you cannot have it unless you have time on board. You cannot teach it in school or in electronics or tablets, it's different stuff. You must have the captain to rely on you, to have a good communication, all this. You have to have time at sea, otherwise it's not working. So some countries, like I think Germany, is facing the need, if it becomes necessary in the future, to have a program dedicated to the pilot training without going to sea. I'm not sure it's going to work. It's something that worries me now. And I end up with the training of pilots. That is a very good, in my opinion, recommendation from IAO. I urge you to download it from the internet. It's very comprehensive. All the stuff is there, including new simulating, using manned models, whatever you can imagine. But again, we have no more maritime administration representative here, because that should be one rule that's among this regulating the job of maritime pilot, to have a training program officially. Because you move to one chaos of certificates from SCCW, our sailing on tankers, and you get, after that, you get nothing. Every 5 years, you get a new certificate. Why? You don't know. They give you one. Still working, they give you another one. So I'm not passing all the subjects. It's very comprehensive, and I think it should be followed. In Portugal, it's still not. In Brazil, not. In some other countries, no, not yet. Some years ago, we lost one pilot in 2018 in Cascais Bay, and the Pilot Association decided, as much as possible, to be connected to the ISN. Is equivalent to National Lifeboat Institution in Portugal, and I cannot express my gratitude to them. And you start training on these last two items, water survival and also recovery from the water, very important. So until this moment, this is the only training project we have national, starting phase 2 briefly. We are trying to have this IMO 960 approved and enforced in Portugal, not possible yet. We've been negotiating, fighting anything you can imagine with the Maritime Administration, but until now, that's all. Thank you for your attention. Hope to see you next time.
Okay. Thank you, Captain Carlos. That was excellent. Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Mario Misfud from EMSA. We just had a fantastic visit yesterday afternoon. I have to thank you again for the time you afforded us yesterday afternoon. I think, like everyone here who came along, were just fascinating to see what you have there, and we look forward to your presentation. Mario joined EMSA in 2009 as head of the ship safety unit. Technical assistance. He's responsible for the conduct of EMSA visit and inspection activity related to maritime safety, and for technical assistance on the human element and monitoring of ROs. Prior to that, Mario joined the Malta Maritime Authority in 1992, eventually assuming the responsibility of manager, and served as main focal point for the transportation of the European Maritime Safety Acquis into Maltese legislation in the run-up to Malta's accession to the EU. Mario, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Leguban. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, again, I join my speaking colleagues, my fellow speakers, in thanking the Nautical Institute for this opportunity to join you on this really significant event. I must say that, just like Captain Fernandez, I was a bit daunted by facing the afternoon session after lunch. It's not exactly the time when everybody's concentration to concentrate on the discussion is really there, but here we go. But more than anything else, I was quite daunted by taking part in a session that's about monitoring and control, which, again, of course, it's not as palatable as when you're talking about innovation and the things we were discussing just before lunch. So I was a bit daunted by that, but especially even in the light of the fact that I come from a European institution, and of course, whereas we have been discussing a lot of aspects of self-monitoring by the industry, self-regulation, here we're looking at about institutional monitoring and control. I hope that I will be able to sell our case to you too. Having said that, in the end, the big brother notion of monitoring and control, despite that, it is of fundamental importance in any type of project or activity, and especially then when we're looking at shipping, where human safety, human life, environment protection, not to mention the commercial aspects, which I suppose a lot of the community here is very interested in, come into play. Again, as I said, my fellow speakers have concentrated a lot on the monitoring and control aspects within the industry. I hope to sell to you this different dimension of institutional monitoring and control, but also the added value that it can have. As Captain Lagoban said, I'm an officer of EMSA. I suppose EMSA does not have an introduction, especially if a good number of you have visited us yesterday afternoon. I lead the unit which, amongst other things, is responsible for inspections to third countries, essentially, to support the Commission's assessment of their STCW compliance, in order for their certificates of competence to continue to be recognized by the European Union and therefore allow their seafarers to work on board EU tonnage. We also conduct inspections of recognized organizations with a view, again, to supporting the Commission in assessing the performance of such organizations that are recognized at EU level. And finally, we also conduct visits to member states to monitor the implementation of the European acquis on maritime safety and environment protection. As you can see, they are undeniably monitoring and control functions through and through, and they can have, yes, substantial ramifications on the states or the entities being monitored, varying from infringement proceedings being taken by the Commission against member states on the basis of our reports to potential consideration of recognition, of withdrawal of recognition of third countries on STCW matters, or penalties, or consideration of recognition of recognized organizations. Yes, they are significant ramifications. However, they are, of course, they have to be seen against a background of a need for clean seas, safer seas, which again is a dire need which we now all recognize. It is a need that had been felt for quite some time, but I believe came to the fore in the late 90s, early noughties, when we had the Erika and the Prestige accident, and these brought to the fore the need to have a better regulatory framework in Europe, better availability of resources even for pollution response, and finally a stricter monitoring and control regime. And therefore we see the birth of EMSA there, and we also see, I'm sure a good number of us are familiar with the raft of new maritime safety legislation that the European Union introduced in 3 maritime packages over the years. Today, I will be looking at the specific aspect of visits to member states. Of course, because of the time, we cannot really elaborate on all of them, but I hope that, again, I will be able to convey how monitoring and control can also be of added value to the party who is being monitored and controlled, even if it looks like an institutional control. First of all, if we're talking about visits to member states, we're looking at an activity that starts at the initiative of the European Commission. The European Commission asks EMSA to start a visit to member states in order to verify the implementation of a particular piece of European legislation related to maritime safety or pollution prevention. The only exception actually is the Directive on Seafarer Training, where there our visits are not reliant on a request by the European Commission, but they are actually prescribed in the very directive itself. Now the directive is 2022/993, according to its recent version, and therefore we conduct these visits to assess the Commission in its monitoring function. These visits usually take the form of cycles. It's generally a 5-year cycle where over that cycle, we visit all the relevant member states in order to see how they are implementing that particular directive. I'm saying relevant because, of course, not every directive applies to all member states. You don't go and conduct a port-sale control visit, a visit on the port-sale control directive in Austria, for example. So it follows that rationale. Since its inception, EMSA has carried out visits in respect of 13 directives, with sometimes multiple cycles being carried out in respect of some of the directives. For example, in the case of the Port State Control Directive and the Seafarer Training Directive, we have carried out multiple cycles. That list is not there for you to memorize, it's just for you to be impressed. So don't try and look and memorize it. Naturally, these cycles' durations overlap. EMSA has existed only for 20 years, and therefore, with a cycle lasting 5 years, of course, cycles overlap, and we sometimes would be conducting as many as 5 or 6 cycles at any one time in our work. On average, during any 1 year, EMSA carries out just over 20 visits to member states. Despite its monitoring objective, which is of course very obvious, this activity has been conducted, however, very much in line with the wider raison d'etre of the agency, which is, from its inception, to be of support. Support not only to the Commission in carrying out its functions, but also to the member states. And it is within this framework that we have always worked, and even as we will see, our activity has evolved in that direction. And we have always looked at a visit to a member state as a dialogue between two parties, us and the auditee, if you can call it member state or other institution. Both parties are really interested in bettering things, making maritime safety safer and cleaner. It is also with this kind of commitment that we also ensure that when we visit member states, we are also equipped with robust technical knowledge from our experts in EMSA. And this has a number of objectives. One, it allows us to better appreciate what are the realities of the member states. We don't just go there with a checklist. Okay, is Article 1 okay? Yes. Article 2 okay? Yes. No, that's not the approach. The approach is to go, yes, we are verifying the implementation, but it is also a dialogue where we understand with technical expertise what are the real problems, what are the technical issues that member states face, sometimes even the difficulties that make it sometimes difficult for a directive to be implemented. And also this technical knowledge also allows us to provide some good technical insight, some reliable feedback to these member states, to the administrations. Let's not forget also that, again, this technical insight is also coupled with the experience that our officers accumulate as they visit one member state after the other. So at any one point, we could be able, when we go and visit our member states, to share insights with them, impart lessons learned, perhaps from other member states before that had been visited, best practices that we have come across from previous visits, and the like. So essentially, that is something that would really help the member states also in that sense, apart from also being part of the overall objective of us supporting the Commission in promoting a bit of a harmonized approach across the European Union when it comes to implementing any particular directive. Again, this frame of mind has also been consolidated in later years with some changes to our founding regulation as an agency. And in 2015, when we adopted a new methodology for visits to member states, which continued to introduce significant concepts that were aimed at maximizing the added value of this exercise, not only just to monitor and control in itself, but for that monitoring and control to have added value to the member states. First of all, this methodology introduced a number of safeguards for the member states, I would say, in order to make sure that the administrative burden that we create when we visit this member state, of course, the administrations need to allocate time and resources to us when we visit, would be minimized. So we have such things in our methodology where a member state can only be visited twice a year, and even if it's visited twice a year, it has to be at a minimum of a 3-month interval. We can't visit when the member state has the presidency of the European Council. A number of safeguards, I would say, that aim to minimize the burden on the member state. Then, on the other hand, we also have new measures in this methodology which really aim to maximize value for the member state. For example, the methodology gives to the member state the opportunity to ask EMSA for assistance after our report on the visit to that member state is issued, to ask EMSA for assistance with recommendations for improvement, and also to support it in developing a corrective action plan. I would say the most significant measure of that methodology way back in 2015, but which is still we're reaping the fruit of it until now, was the concept of horizontal analysis. As you can appreciate, at the end of a cycle of visits, EMSA will be sitting on a really, really unique set of information about how any one directive is being implemented Europe-wide. And it is for this reason that the agency, therefore, carries out what we call an end-of-cycle horizontal analysis, where this full set of results is analyzed horizontally. Therefore, we can identify common issues, horizontal issues that are an issue in all the member states, root causes for them, lessons learned, good practices that we have come across, and even possible ways forward how to improve things. And again, through this horizontal analysis, which is then disseminated to all the member states, it can serve as a channel of cross-fertilization of ideas and lessons learned. These horizontal analyses have also served sometimes to detect even flaws or gaps or areas for improvement in the European directives themselves. When you go to all the member states and you find that a common factor is that there is one particular provision or one particular requirement that nobody can actually implement, it also serves as an alarm bell, basically, that can be relayed to the European Commission for further consideration eventually. In fact, horizontal analysis that we carry out in this respect have also fed into a number of evaluation exercises that the Commission has carried out about its legislation. New legislation is sometimes is actually followed after 5 years by an evaluation of how it is implemented, whether it was effective, and our horizontal analysis contribute to that. And also in impact assessments that are carried out, refit exercises and revision exercises about existing legislation. We also carry out sometimes mid-cycle horizontal analysis. Why do we carry these out? Because essentially, when in the first part, I would say, first half of the cycle, we already see some emergent horizontal issues, it would be a bit useless to wait until the full cycle is finished to alert the stakeholders, mainly the Commission and the Member States, to do something about it when it can be flagged more immediately. So sometimes we actually carry out mid-cycle horizontal analysis in this respect. Again, a reminder, all this is essentially aimed at maximizing the added value of what is essentially a monitoring and control exercise, for it not to just be a matter of monitoring and controlling, but to really maximize the added value to the intended beneficiaries. A quick look at this slide will show how this approach towards maximizing the added value, even for the auditees, if we can call them that way, has transformed our process. If we look at a cycle of visits, in fact, probably we would be looking at the third circle, visit cycle starts, and the fifth circle, visit cycle ends. By virtue of this approach towards maximizing added value, you can see that the cycle of visits has become a much more complex exercise aimed at maximizing as much as possible the beneficial results of all the information that we gather in order to impart it not only to the European Commission in its monitoring and control function, but also to the member states in order for them to be able to improve. This, of course, is part, I would say, of the overall mentality of EMSA, even particularly in later years, to be the main source of support for the European community, for the maritime community. Beyond my scope of operation within EMSA, of course, we are all aware of the raft of maritime applications that EMSA has launched over the years: SafeSynet, Thetis, CleanSynet. These are all things that the industry makes wide use of. The pollution response capability that we make available to member states, the maritime surveillance tools that we have launched, the training we provide to stakeholders, the research that we commission, and even the occasions where we can facilitate dialogue on technical aspects that we carry out at EMSA. All within the rationale of being of as much support as possible. Whilst I congratulate the Nautical Institute for its 50th anniversary today, its 50th birthday. Again, as you may have known yesterday when you visited EMSA, this year we're also celebrating our 20th anniversary. We're a much younger partner, but again, I also want to congratulate the Nautical Institute for its equally priceless contribution that it gives to the maritime community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And I think it's safe to say, as individual members and an institute, we're all leaving here with a far better understanding of EMSA and what they do and how they protect their area. So we really thank you for that and for the visit yesterday. I think it's been really useful to all of us. Okay, I'm very pleased to say we're going to be able to take a couple of questions. Has anyone got any burning questions? I know we can go to tea, and that's often the better way to ask questions, I find. But do we have any questions from the floor to our two members who are here still? No? Yes. Thank you, John.
I wish I'd put my tie on again now. I'm on the camera. John Lloyd, Nautical Institute, thank you for the presentation. It's been absolutely wonderful insights. I share your frustration that after thousands of years, we still are dealing with a rope ladder for pilot transfer arrangements. And interestingly, you're one of very few people to refer to safety culture amongst the pilots. I'll get it fixed for next time. Quite simply isn't good enough. We should be sending those ships to anchorage and having them fixed before they depart. It's not difficult. It just takes some willful engagement. I wanted to ask you about manned model ship handling. You refer to that as one of the recommended ways of enhancing pilotage skills. It's a good question, stop it. And I just wondered, what is the commitment in Portugal to the use of scale model ship handling, where you go, what the experience has been, or not?
Like I told you on the presentation, we have until now no national framework regarding the training altogether. So we had a few pilots that have been to training models, I don't know, many models. I don't know if someone in the room or not. The president of Apibar was in this. I had a picture of him in one man model. There was two retired pilots that have been there too, and from Setúbal, 3 or 4. I think that should be very important, especially for younger pilots, and especially for bigger vessels, of course. That should be followed. That's my opinion on it.
Yeah.
As it, I was about to make a short statement at the beginning of the intervention, but I didn't. I'll do it now, because in the room there's the head of Lisbon Pilot Department and the safety director, what I convey here is only my opinions. If you have any official position from the port, we'll give it to the other side. But I'm going to try to answer with my best.
Thank you very much. We'll just report it in Seaways, that'll be fine. And just not to let EMSA escape scot-free, but I asked the question yesterday about the impactfulness of the work, the great work that EMSA does. And I loved what I was hearing yesterday about the democratization of the service that you provide, that poor nations are now getting a service they would not be able to fulfill otherwise. But I think for our organization, for every organization, it's about impact. So you're busy doing surveys. My question yesterday related to the Philippines and a potential, yeah, I knew you'd be pleased. My question related to the Philippines and you know, the potential lack of appetite to address that as an issue. But in a wider context, how satisfied is the Secretariat of EMSA with constructive responses to the feedback that you give the member nations?
By member nations, you mean the European member states? Well, let's put it this way. EMSA has a very definite task in this whole process, and that is to go, inspect, verify, and give its technical insight. And again, this is not an attempt to avoid the question, but I would say the reaction and the interaction with the member states in terms of relaying the Philippines issue, if you want to take that as an example, or others, to some extent lies with the European Commission. We, of course, report what we find, of course, with high technical competence. Jaime Vega, who will be participating in the fourth session, heads the human element team in my unit, and again, he has been numerous times to the Philippines. But again, our role is pretty prescribed, I would say. So in that sense, the issue of how satisfied the EMSA Secretariat is with its interaction with the member states about such an issue is to some extent something that would pertain to the European Commission more than anything else, where the policy side, the discussion as to what we report is good enough, not good enough, where does it lead, what changes or not should be taken, is really beyond our remit. So I'm afraid I have to disappoint you a bit on that.
We're never disappointed with your feedback. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for that, John. Your considered questions, appreciated. Okay, I'm going to bring the session to a close, but I would like to just share a couple of thoughts that I have with you after listening to these great speakers, and I thank you again for this afternoon. Captain Ken mentioned nuclear power on ships, and he said this is a difficult subject, something we don't tend to talk about. But isn't that what the Nautical Institute is really about? And perhaps why we're still here after 50 years and thriving, because we do talk about subjects like this, but we do this in a sensible, considered, and professional way. And we utilize the experience of our nearly 7,000 members to do this. And I'm thinking particularly of, we have some cadets in the room, which we're delighted to see today, and the value of the Nautical Institute going forward is that we are able to talk about these sort of subjects. And finally, Captain Carlos here was talking about problems with technology on ships, and you and I have both seen the problems with the ECDIS, particularly in pilotage waters. And Captain, you said, I am not an expert. With respect, sir, absolutely you are, because you're the one using the equipment, you're the end user there. And again, thinking about the Nautical Institute and our members such as this, we have NGO status at IMO, and we can take the problems we are experiencing as seafarers and take them all the way to IMO, where we can present those problems. Again, value of being a member of the Nautical Institute. So I'll leave that particularly with you guys over there as you look towards your future careers. It's time for tea. Thank you.